Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
People always say you should honor your parents, but I wonder how many of them have actually wiped piss off a linoleum floor at 3 in the morning while your back screams and your dreams rot in the corner like forgotten leftovers. They love to say family first, but they don't show up for the graveyard shift when your father's coughing blood and your job wants to know why you missed another Monday. I wasn't a nurse, not technically, but after 5 years of sponge baths, pill schedules, feeding tubes, and watching a man who used to swing hammers like Thor himself waist down to skin and regret, I think I earned the damn title. Dad was once built like a tree trunk, with calloused hands and a voice that could clear a room or comfort a crying child, depending on the day. He built our house with his own hands back in the late 70s, back when interest rates could still ruin your life, and men like him didn't ask for help unless their lungs gave out. And even then, he didn't ask. He just sat there, looking out the window, slowly drowning in silence, while I poured my 30s into an 4 drip. I left my job, my apartment, my boyfriend. Well, he actually left me first, said I was too focused on someone else's life to build our own. That's rich, coming from a man who once cried because the cable went out during football. Ethan? My little brother? He was always the golden boy. Tan, smiling, Instagram filtered, with hair that flopped in all the right places. He had a knack for timing too. Every time things got hard at home, had conveniently already booked a flight, Thailand, Costa Rica, Greece. Just clearing my head, he'd text, like his head was a cluttered storage unit only Mediterranean sunsets could declutter. Meanwhile, I was here in Ohio, up to my elbows in adult diapers and Ensure. There were days when I resented the sound of my father's breath. That slow, dragging wheeze, like a tire slowly deflating on gravel. Then I'd feel guilty. Then tired. Then nothing. That's how it worked. Resentment, guilt, numbness. Like a shitty emotional casserole you eat every day with a fork that's slightly bent. I tried to keep him dignified, Kept his hair trimmed, his face clean-shaven. I'd prop him up in the wheelchair, roll him out to the porch when the weather wasn't punishing, and we'd sit there like mismatched lawn ornaments. Sometimes he'd say something funny. Sometimes he'd forget who I was. Once, he called me Marilyn, my mother's name. She died when I was 22. Cancer. Fast and mean. That's when I started building my guilt fortress, brick by invisible brick. After she passed, Dad started drinking more. Ethan left for college and never really looked back. And I just stayed. When he finally went, it was quiet. Peaceful, if you want to romanticize it. I was holding his hand, which had gone soft and slack like overcooked pasta. I said, "It's okay, Dad. You can go." And he did. No drama. Just silence. No last words, no cinematic declarations of love or hidden truths. Just breath, then none. The funeral was small, as he would have wanted. Closed casket. A few neighbors, some of his old construction buddies, one of whom smelled so strongly of motor oil and Marlboros I thought the coffin would catch fire. I gave the eulogy. Simple, honest. He was a hard man. But he showed up. He didn't run. I didn't look at Ethan as I said it. He wasn't there anyway. He showed up 2 hours late. No tie. Aviators. A fresh tan that made him look like he'd come from a beach photo shoot, not the airport. He hugged me like a man checking off a social obligation and didn't even ask where Dad was buried. Just said, "Shit, I missed the service. That sucks." I nodded. It was either that or punch him in the throat. Then, 2 hours after everyone had gone home, after I'd peeled off my black dress and sat down on the couch for the first time in what felt like 5 years, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Hey. Sorry. Don't forget to split the inheritance." No period at the end. Just that. Just a text. Like he was asking me to pick up milk. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen, thinking of all the things I could say. But instead, I just put the phone face down and laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind that scrapes its way out of your chest like it's been locked in a basement and finally saw daylight. I didn't reply, but I knew something right then. I knew Ethan thought he'd gotten away with it. That he could just swoop back in, collect half of whatever Dad had left, and be back on a beach by the weekend. But Dad wasn't as gone as Ethan thought. He had one more thing to say, and I was going to make damn sure Ethan heard it. He arrived at the house like he'd been summoned for a parade, not a post-funeral estate meeting, with a suitcase that looked more expensive than my last paycheck and sunglasses still perched arrogantly on his smug, tanned face even though it was cloudy and damn near drizzling. I watched him from the porch like a tired old watchdog that's too worn out to bark but still knows when an intruder's stepped on sacred ground. His shirt was half unbuttoned, showing off a chest that probably hadn't lifted more than a mojito in years, and his smile, that same greasy, all-American grin he used to charm every teacher and girlfriend and parole officer he ever met, stretched wide like he owned the moment, like grief was just a mood he'd scroll past if he didn't feel like dealing with it. He said, "Ratch, you look older." Then he laughed like that was some kind of compliment, as if 5 years of sponge baths, bedpans, and sleepless nights could be hidden behind drugstore mascara and a brave face. I didn't bother answering. I just opened the door and let him waltz back into a house he hadn't seen in nearly 6 years, the same house where I'd been losing pieces of myself one pill schedule at a time. He dropped his bag in the hallway like it was still his home, and he had a right to take up space here. He walked around like he was doing a damn home tour for a blog, touching things that didn't belong to him anymore, commenting on the color of the walls like I'd had time to redecorate between emergency room visits. "You changed the curtains," he said. I looked at him and said, "Yeah, right after I changed Dad's colostomy bag." That shut him up for a second, but only a second, because Ethan's never been the type to feel shame for long. He made himself a drink, rummaged through the cabinet, found the bottle of bourbon I'd hidden behind the cans of soup, and sat on the couch like it hadn't collected dust and sorrow for the last year. "So, what did the old man leave us?" he asked with a smirk that made me want to throw the glass across the room. "Split down the middle, right? I mean, that's fair." Fair. That word felt like poison in my mouth. I'd been his nurse for 13,000 days, give or take, and he wanted to talk about fair. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking, 13,000 days? That would be, what, over 35 years? Yeah, I screwed that up. I meant, I think, like 4,000. Maybe a little more. Math wasn't my strong suit, survival was. But that's the thing, right? When you're in it every damn day, every hour feels like a century. So yeah, maybe I inflated the number, but you tell me, if you lived in the same loop of meds, meals, and messes, wouldn't it feel like decades too? Back then, I used to watch his photos online, Ethan's, not Dad's. Beaches, boats, booze, beautiful women with sun-kissed skin and names that probably ended in vowels. One time he posted a video of himself cliff diving in Bali while I was changing the dressings on Dad's bed sores. The contrast would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I never left a comment. I never liked a post. I just watched and kept feeding the bitterness like it was the only thing keeping me alive. We didn't talk much that evening. Ethan passed out early, still reeking of entitlement and imported alcohol. I stayed up, sitting on the edge of Dad's empty hospital bed in the den, just staring at the oxygen tank that no longer hissed. It was like the house exhaled when he died. Everything was still. Too still. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Space. There was finally space to breathe, to feel, maybe even to be angry without guilt. The next morning, we drove to the lawyer's office in silence. He wore a new shirt, buttoned this time, and sunglasses again even though we were inside. The receptionist smiled too wide when she saw us, probably assumed we were close siblings, bonded by grief and duty. If only she knew. We sat across from the lawyer, a soft-spoken man with wire-frame glasses and a voice like decaf coffee, and he slid the manila folder across the table without ceremony. I reached into my purse, pulled out the letter Dad had given me, sealed, yellowed, with Ethan's name in thick black ink on the front, and handed it over slowly. "Dad wrote this before he died," I said, watching Ethan's expression shift from smug to curious. "He said you should read it first." And for the first time since he swaggered back into our lives, Ethan looked like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't so sure of the outcome anymore. There are moments in life when time doesn't stop, it just leans forward slightly curious, like it's watching a scene it's seen 1,000 times before, but this time something feels different, heavier, like it might not go the way anyone expects. That was the feeling in that lawyer's office when Ethan slid his thumb beneath the seal of Dad's envelope, the paper crackling like dry leaves underfoot, that tiny sound louder than any voice in the room. He peeled it open slowly, carefully, with the hesitation of a man expecting either gold or garbage, and suspecting it could be both. He didn't read it out loud. He scanned the page, eyes flicking back and forth, and I watched the change in his face like a storm rolling in over a sunny beach. First the brows furrowed just slightly, then the mouth, that smug, ever-ready smirk, fell into something flatter, something closer to confused. His jaw twitched once, then again, and for a second I thought he might laugh, maybe toss the letter back across the table with a shrug and some snide remark like, "Classic Dad." But the laugh never came. The lawyer, polite to a fault, cleared his throat gently and said, "Would you like me to proceed?" And Ethan, who never hesitated a day in his life, who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket or into a stranger's bed without blinking, stammered, "No, no, go ahead," like the words had weights tied to them. I didn't look away from him. I wanted him to feel it, not just the words in the letter, but the presence behind them, the years of silence, of absence, of ducked responsibility dressed up as freedom. I wanted him to feel Dad in that moment, not the weak, broken version he barely visited, but the sharp-edged, steel-spined man who used to say things once and mean them forever. But before the lawyer started reading, before the numbers and details turned into legal noise, my mind slipped backward. Just a week, but it felt like a lifetime. That final week with Dad was strange, like the calm before a long-delayed storm, when the air feels too still and your skin tingles with the electricity of everything unsaid. His mind had been drifting for months, but that week it came back with eerie clarity. He started talking like he had a schedule to keep, like death had sent a reminder notice, and he wanted to tie up loose ends before it knocked. He called me into the room while I was folding laundry, a stack of Dad's stained t-shirts and threadbare sweatpants in my arms, and said, "Sit down, Ratch." I remember blinking at him, surprised he even knew my name that day, let alone said it with that old tone, the one that used to freeze us mid-run when we were kids breaking the rules. He was propped up with extra pillows, the skin on his face stretched thinner than I'd ever seen, but his eyes were sharp, unsettlingly sharp. "You think I don't know what he's been doing?" he said, and I didn't even ask who he was. "He left," Dad continued, voice steady, "but you stayed. And that should mean something." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there holding that stupid pile of laundry like it was a shield against what was coming. He reached into the drawer, pulled out the envelope, already addressed, already sealed, and held it out like an offering. "You give this to your brother after I'm gone," he said. "No sooner. And if you don't, well, then I guess the old bastard gets away clean." I took the letter but didn't promise anything. He didn't ask for a promise, just gave me that look, the one he used when he wanted to say he loved us but didn't quite have the tools. Then he said, "If you want to even the score, this'll do it." And I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Back in the office, the lawyer droned on numbers, assets, titles, words that meant money or land or legal authority, but I kept watching Ethan. He sat there with the letter still in hand, like it had grown heavier the longer he held it. His fingers trembled slightly, just enough to notice. I didn't need to ask what it said. I already knew. And finally, after the legal dust settled, after the lines were drawn and the balances shifted, I saw it, the line in his father's handwriting, etched deep into his ego like a scar that would never fade. You took your freedom. Now you can pay for it. He folded the letter slowly, tucked it back into the envelope like it might burn him if he held it too long, and for the first time since he walked back into our lives, Ethan didn't look like the golden boy anymore. He looked like a man who finally understood what it cost to walk away and how much worse it feels when the bill finally arrives. The sound of the lawyer's voice was like a distant hum, just background noise to the slow-motion unraveling of my brother's last illusion, the fragile one he'd carried in his perfectly manicured hands ever since he swaggered back into town, assuming that a smile and some half-assed charm could replace 5 years of willful absence. He sat in the worn leather chair across from me, shifting now, uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids and Dad caught him lying about where the missing $20 went. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched tight enough to crack enamel, as the lawyer cleared his throat and began the formal recital of our father's final instructions. To my daughter Rachel, who sacrificed more than I ever had the right to ask, I leave the house at 412 Birchwood Drive, the adjoining acre of land, and the entirety of my savings and retirement account, which, after taxes and adjustments, amounts to $127,000 and change. The lawyer paused, eyes flicking toward Ethan briefly, though the words already hung in the room like smoke from a slow-burning fire. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched Ethan, waited for that exact moment when understanding would sink its teeth in. To my son Ethan, the lawyer continued, slower now, maybe trying to soften the blow, maybe just savoring the drama unfolding across his mahogany desk. I leave a leather-bound journal containing my personal reflections, and a list of all debts I settled on his behalf during the course of his adult life. There was silence then, a thick, suffocating silence that seemed to pull the walls closer, the kind of silence that only happens when someone is too shocked to even pretend they're fine. Ethan blinked once, twice, then gave a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind of brittle, humorless sound you make when the world suddenly stops making sense and you're left staring at the broken pieces wondering how they all got there. You're joking, he said, not to the lawyer. Not even really to me, just out loud, to the room, to the ceiling, to whatever cosmic force he believed was currently fucking him over. The lawyer didn't respond. He just pushed the leather journal across the desk with a careful hand, like it might explode. Ethan didn't reach for it right away. He stood up instead, knocking his chair backward with a scrape that echoed off the walls. His face flushed a deep, furious red. "This is bullshit," he snapped, eyes finally locking on mine. "You did this. You manipulated him. You poisoned his mind against me." I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't say a damn thing. I let him flail. I let him burn. He pointed a shaking finger at the journal. "What the hell is this even supposed to be? A fucking scrapbook of guilt? A list of IOUs I never agreed to?" He turned back to the lawyer. He was dying. She was with him every day. You think that's not coercion? You think this isn't fraud? The lawyer, bless his quiet, steel-spined soul, adjusted his glasses and said simply, the will was witnessed, notarized, and confirmed during a period of clear mental capacity. There is no fraud here, Mr. Collins. Ethan stared at him, chest heaving, lips curling into a sneer so familiar it almost felt nostalgic. Then, suddenly, I was back in the hallway of our house 5 years earlier, standing in the shadows while he pulled 2 20s out of Dad's wallet, thinking no one saw him, thinking no one would ever know. I hadn't said anything back then, not because I was scared or loyal, but because I wanted to see how far he'd fall when he thought the world would always catch him. But Dad had known. He always knew. That was the thing about him, he wasn't loud, but he remembered. And he never gave a second chance when you didn't earn it. Ethan snatched the journal off the table, flipping through the pages like he was looking for something to vindicate him, to justify the years he spent gallivanting around the world while I bathed our father and watched his mind slip away piece by piece. The pages were covered in tight handwriting, peppered with entries titled things like loan to Ethan, unpaid, missed call, no response, Thailand withdrawal, covered by me, and the final one, the one I knew would be there, titled simply, Final Debt Settled. He slammed the journal shut and turned to me, something darker than rage simmering in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed, voice low and venomous. "You think you won? You think this is justice?" I didn't respond. I just stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my black dress, and met his gaze with a calm I didn't entirely understand. Because he was wrong. This wasn't justice. This was what was left when justice had long since given up and left the room. And I hadn't won anything. But he had finally lost. It was just past midnight when I saw his headlights cut across the living room curtains like two sharp knives dragging across fabric that had already seen too much light, too much dark, and too many damn mornings spent wondering how long one person could carry someone else's weight without going under themselves. I didn't move at first. I just sat there on the couch, wrapped in the same old blanket Dad used to nap under back when he still had the strength to walk himself to bed. The room smelled like dust and lemon cleaner, and the silence was so complete it made the ticking wall clock feel like an accusation. Then the engine shut off, and I heard the car door open and close. Slow, deliberate steps on the porch followed, the kind of steps people take when they don't know if they're welcome, because deep down, they already know the answer. I opened the door before he could knock. Ethan stood there in jeans that looked a little too clean for a man whose world had just come crashing down and a hoodie that still had the airport tag swinging from the zipper like a guilty little flag. His face was drawn, and for once, he didn't look tanned or carefree or like he had a backup plan waiting somewhere in a beach town. He looked tired. Real tired. Like someone who'd finally run out of places to outrun himself. "Can I come in?" he asked, not cocky, not demanding, just small. It was strange hearing him like that. I stepped aside, not because I wanted to, but because there's a part of you that never stops offering the door, even when you know it leads nowhere good. We sat in silence for a minute, then 5, until he finally leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "I thought if I just showed up at the end, it'd be enough." His voice cracked in a way I didn't expect. I thought I could still be the good guy, or at least not the villain. He looked at me then, eyes watery, but still stubborn, still searching for a foothold, still desperate for me to throw him a rope. "But I'm the villain now, right?" I didn't answer him. I didn't have to. Instead, I got up, walked to the old wooden desk in the corner, the one Dad built with his own hands back when things were still fixable, and pulled out a single page from the journal. It wasn't an entry. It was a drawing. Crude, childish lines. 2 stick figures holding hands, one slightly taller, the other wearing a messy halo of scribbled black hair. Rachel and Ethan scrawled across the top in faded crayon. At the bottom, in Dad's handwriting, was one line. "You both started together. Only one of you stayed. And that's who gets to finish this story." I handed it to him wordlessly. He stared at it for a long time. Didn't say a word. His fingers trembled, and for a second, I thought he might rip it in half or throw it at the wall or crumple it into his fist like he used to do with report cards and bills and every other piece of reality he didn't want to deal with. But he didn't. He just folded it carefully, once, twice, and tucked it into his pocket. "I didn't think he kept any of that stuff," he murmured. "I figured it all went out with the trash." I looked at him, really looked, and saw what Dad must have seen in his last few days, a boy who never grew up because no one ever made him, a man who had no idea how much it costs to be responsible for someone else's pain. And for a flicker of a moment, I pitied him. Not because of what he lost, but because he never knew what it meant to stay. He stood up to leave, and as he reached the door, he paused and turned back, like he wanted to say something else, something final, something that could fix even one shard of this broken mess between us. But I didn't give him the chance. I closed the door behind him slowly and locked it, not angrily, not dramatically, just firmly, like I was sealing off a room that no longer served a purpose. The deadbolt clicked louder than I expected, like a full stop at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. And then I sat back down. In the quiet that followed, I reached for the journal again. My fingers traced the worn leather, the corners softened by time and use. I turned page after page, entries I'd already read, old notes about debts and betrayals, and one-liner reflections that stung more than they soothed. And then I reached the end. A page I hadn't seen before. Blank at first glance. But as the light caught the surface just right, I saw it, writing in faint, almost invisible ink. My breath caught. I leaned closer. Read the first line. And then I froze. My expression changed, but you won't know why. Because that last page, that secret, that truth, that was for me. And whatever it said, it changed everything.